You think you know exactly how your life is going to play out, especially when you reach my age. I am 67 years old. I have lived in this quiet suburban neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina, for over 30 years. I thought the turbulent years were behind me. I thought the drama, the fighting, and the heartache were things of the past, buried deep under the soil of my well-tended garden. I was wrong. It started like any other Tuesday. The morning air was crisp, the kind that makes you pull your knitted cardigan a little tighter around your shoulders. I was sitting on my porch, just as I do every morning, nursing a cup of hot coffee. This is my sanctuary. My house isn't a mansion. It is a modest two-story home with white siding that has seen better days and a porch that creaks when it rains. But it is mine. Or at least I thought it was. I looked out at the street, watching the neighbors head off to work. I felt a sense of peace. My children are grown and gone, living their own busy lives. After my divorce from Bill 5 years ago, I had finally grown used to the quiet. I had learned to love the independence. I didn't have to answer to anyone. I didn't have to pick up anyone's dirty socks. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was comfortable. Then, a car turned onto the street. It wasn't one of the neighbors' sedans. It was a brand new, silver luxury SUV, polished to a shine that hurt my eyes in the morning sun. It looked aggressive, out of place among our older Toyotas and Fords. I watched it slow down, assuming the driver was looking for a house number. But it didn't pass my house. It turned right into my driveway. My heart gave a strange little flutter, a warning bell ringing deep in my chest. I set my coffee cup down on the small wicker table. I squinted as the driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. She was young, maybe 45, with hair dyed a shade of blonde that was too bright for nature to have created. She wore high heels that clicked sharply on the pavement, and she carried herself with an air of immense importance. I recognized her immediately, even though we had only met briefly in passing. It was Lori, my ex-husband's new wife. And then, stepping out of the passenger side, came Bill. Seeing him there, in my driveway, felt like seeing a ghost. We had been married for 40 years before he left. He looked older now, more tired than I remembered. His shoulders were slumped, and he was fiddling with the buttons on his jacket, refusing to look up at the house, refusing to look at me. I stood up slowly, my hands gripping the porch railing. Why were they here? We had settled everything years ago. The papers were signed. The tears were dried. There was no reason for Bill to be standing on my concrete walk. Lori didn't wait for him. She marched up the walkway with a purpose that made my stomach turn. She wasn't looking at the flowers I had planted. She was looking at the house like a health inspector looking for a violation. Her eyes scanned the windows, the roof, the front door. It was a predatory look. She reached the steps and didn't stop. She came right up onto the porch, invading my personal space before I could even say a word. "Good morning," I said, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. I tried to maintain my dignity. I was the woman of this house, and I wouldn't let her rattle me. Lori didn't return the greeting. She didn't even pretend to be polite. She stopped 3 feet away from me, and that is when I saw it, the look on her face. It was a smirk, a greedy, arrogant smirk that twisted her red lips. She looked at me not as a person, but as an obstacle she was about to kick out of the way. She was holding a thick manila folder in her hand, clutching it like a weapon. "Bill," I called out to him, ignoring her for a moment. "What is going on?" Bill had made it to the bottom of the steps. He stopped there. He looked at his shoes, then at the siding of the house, anywhere but my eyes. He remained silent, just a shadow behind his loud, colorful wife. Lori answered for him. She took a step closer, filling the air with heavy, expensive perfume. We aren't here for a chat, Edna, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We are here for business. I have no business with you, I said firmly. Please get off my porch. Lori let out a short, sharp laugh. She tapped the folder in her hand with a perfectly manicured fingernail. Oh, I think you do. You see, Bill and I have been doing some reading. We've been looking into the estate of Bill's late mother. My blood ran cold. Bill's mother, Martha, had passed away 6 months ago. She was a sweet woman who had loved me like a daughter. She had gifted us this house when Bill and I were first married decades ago. It was a wedding gift, a start to our life. What does Martha have to do with this? I asked, my hands trembling slightly on the railing. Lori took another step forward. She was so close now I could see the heavy makeup settling into the lines around her eyes. She held the folder up, waving it in my face. We're here for our rightful share, she declared, the smirk growing wider. Bill's mother never meant for you to keep this place. Not after the divorce. This house is family property, and since you aren't family anymore, we are taking it back. The words hung in the air like smoke. Taking it back. Move out. That's impossible, I whispered. This is my home. It has been my home for 30 years. It was part of the settlement. Mistakes were made, Lori said, shrugging her shoulders as if she were talking about a grocery order and not my entire life. But don't worry. We have the paperwork to prove it. Bill is the heir. And as his wife, what's his is mine. She turned to look at Bill, expecting him to back her up. Tell her, Bill. I looked at the man I had spent 4 decades with. I looked for a shred of decency, a spark of the man who had once fathered my children. I wanted him to tell her she was crazy. I wanted him to apologize and drag her back to that shiny car. But Bill just stood there, staring at the cracks in the pavement. He didn't say a word. In that moment, the morning peace shattered completely. The birds stopped singing. The coffee went cold. I looked at Lori's triumphant face, and then at the house that held every memory of my children growing up. They weren't just here to visit. They were here to erase me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I realized then that the quiet years were over. The fight for my life had just walked up the front steps, wearing a greedy smirk and holding a folder full of lies. I gripped the railing until my knuckles turned white. I wasn't going to let them take this, not without a war. I didn't invite her in. I didn't step aside and offer a welcoming gesture. But Lori didn't need an invitation. Before I could even process the threats she had just spat out on my porch, she moved. She pushed past me, her shoulder brushing roughly against mine, and stepped into my foyer. The audacity of it took my breath away. In the South, you don't cross a threshold unless you are welcomed. But Lori walked in as if she owned the place. Her heels clicked loudly on the hardwood floors I had polished on my hands and knees just yesterday. Bill, come on, she called out over her shoulder, not even looking back at him. She was already scanning the entryway, her nose wrinkled as if she had smelled something rotten. Bill shuffled in after her, keeping his head down. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He closed the front door behind him, sealing us in. The click of the latch sounded like a prison door closing. Suddenly, my sanctuary, my safe haven, felt small and suffocating. My goodness, Lori said, her voice echoing in the quiet hall. She ran a finger along the wainscoting. It's darker in here than I thought. And small. Photos really can be deceiving, can't they? Get out of my house, I said, my voice shaking. I wasn't scared. I was furious. My hands were balled into fists at my sides. You have no right to be in here. Lori ignored me completely. It was as if I were a piece of furniture she didn't like. She walked straight into the living room. I followed her, panic rising in my chest. This was the room where my children opened their Christmas presents. This was where Bill and I had watched movies on Friday nights for 40 years. Now, this stranger was standing in the center of the rug, looking around with a critical sneer. She walked over to the window and pinched the fabric of my curtains between two fingers. They were floral drapes, heavy and high quality. I had saved up for months to buy them 10 years ago. Dated, Lori announced. These are absolutely ancient. They block out all the light. They have to go. We'll need to rip all of this out to modernize the space. Don't touch those, I snapped, stepping forward. She dropped the fabric as if it were dirty and turned her attention to the rest of the room. She took a deep breath, sniffing the air theatrically. "Do you smell that, Bill?" she asked, looking back at him. Bill was hovering in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "Smell what?" Bill mumbled. "That stale smell," Lori said, waving her hand in front of her face. "It smells like old lady, like mothballs and medicine. We are going to have to hire industrial cleaners to get that stench out of the carpets. Maybe we should just rip the carpets up. Hardwood is better for resale value anyway." I felt the blood rush to my face. My house did not smell. I burned vanilla candles. I kept fresh lavender in the kitchen. She was saying it just to be cruel, just to make me feel small and withered. She wanted me to feel like I was already a ghost haunting the property. She continued her inspection, prowling around the room. She stopped in front of the mantel. My heart hammered against my ribs. That mantel was filled with my most precious treasures. Photos of the grandkids, a clock we got for our 25th anniversary, and my collection of porcelain figurines. Lori reached out. Her hand hovered over the centerpiece, a delicate porcelain bluebird. "No," I warned her. "Do not touch that." She looked at me, her eyes cold and challenging. Then, slowly, deliberately, she picked it up. "It's just cheap ceramic, Edna," she scoffed, turning it over in her hands. "Made in China, probably." "It was a gift from Bill's mother," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "She gave that to me the day we moved in. It was her way of blessing this home." Lori rolled her eyes. "Well, Martha had questionable taste. It's tacky." She went to set it back down, but she didn't look at where she was placing it. She set it on the very edge of the mantel. It wobbled. I gasped and lunged forward, catching the bluebird just before it tipped over and shattered on the hearth. I cradled the cold porcelain against my chest, feeling the frantic beat of my heart. Lori didn't even apologize. She just laughed, a short, cruel sound. "Relax. You act like it's a diamond. It's just clutter. When we take over, all of this junk goes in the trash. We need a clean slate." I turned my back on her, clutching the figurine, and looked at Bill. He was still standing there, watching his new wife dismantle my life with words. "Bill," I said, my voice cracking, "how can you let her do this? How can you stand there and let her talk about our home like this?" Bill shifted his weight. He put his hands in his pockets. "We raised our babies in this room, Bill," I pleaded, trying to reach the man I once knew. "Do you remember? Joey took his first steps right there on that rug. Sarah had her prom pictures taken in front of this fireplace. This isn't just an asset. It's our history. It's my life." I hoped, foolishly, that he would soften. I hoped he would remember the years of love and hard work we put into these walls. I hoped he would tell Lori to stop. Finally, Bill looked up. He met my eyes, but there was no warmth in them. There was only a cold, hard detachment. "That was a long time ago, Edna," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "It's still my home," I insisted. "It's a big asset," Bill said, reciting the words as if he had rehearsed them. "The market in Charlotte is booming right now. This house is sitting on a lot of equity. Lori and we have plans. We want to expand our business. We need the capital. You need the capital. I repeated, stunned. So you're going to throw me onto the street? Where am I supposed to go? Bill? I'm 67 years old. I can't just start over. Bill shrugged, a gesture that cut deeper than any insult Lori had thrown. You can find somewhere smaller, he said casually. You don't need 4 bedrooms. It's a waste of space for one person. Get a condo or one of those senior apartments. Honestly, Edna, you should be thanking us. The upkeep on this place is too much for you anyway. The cruelty of it washed over me. He wasn't just greedy, he was dismissive. He was looking at the woman who had washed his clothes, cooked his meals, and raised his children for 40 years, and he was telling me I was taking up too much space. He was telling me I didn't deserve a house with a garden or a guest room for the grandkids. He was telling me I was expired. Lori walked back over to him and looped her arm through his, resting her head on his shoulder. She looked at me with that same triumphant smirk. See, she said, Bill agrees. It's just business. Edna, don't be so dramatic. We'll have the lawyers send over the official eviction notice by the end of the week. You should probably start packing. I don't want to have to hire movers to clear out your hoarding. They stood there, a united front of greed and selfishness, standing in the middle of the living room I had painted myself. I felt small. I felt invisible. But beneath the shock and the hurt, something else was starting to simmer. He told me to find somewhere smaller. He told me I was a waste of space. I looked at Bill, really looked at him, and realized the man I mourned was dead. The man standing in front of me was a stranger. And strangers don't get to take my home without a fight. Get out, I whispered. We're leaving, Lori said, checking her watch. We've seen enough. It's going to be a good job, Bill, but the bones are okay. She turned on her heel and clicked back toward the door. Bill followed her like an obedient puppy, never looking back at me. I stood alone in the silence they left behind, holding the Bluebird, listening to the roar of their expensive engine as they drove away. They thought they had won. They thought I was just a weak old woman who would pack up and fade away. But as I looked around my living room at the dated curtains and the clutter on the mantel, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the hours between midnight and dawn pacing the hallway, listening to the house settle. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a goodbye. By 8 o'clock the next morning, I was sitting in the reception area of Martha Higgins' law office. Martha has been my lawyer for 20 years. She handled the divorce. She is 68, sharp as a tack, and doesn't suffer fools. She wears colorful scarves and reading glasses on a chain, but don't let that fool you. In a courtroom, she is a shark. When she finally called me back, she didn't smile. That was my first bad sign. I sat down in the leather chair opposite her heavy oak desk, clutching my purse like a lifeline. Give it to me straight, Martha, I said. Can they do this? Can they just walk in and take my home? Martha took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She sighed, a long, heavy sound that seemed to suck the air out of the room. I've looked over the documents Lori filed, Martha said, her voice gentle but firm. And I've pulled the probate records for Bill's mother. And it's not good, Edna. My stomach dropped, but the house was a gift. Martha gave it to us. She did, Martha explained. But technically, the deed remained in a trust until her death. And about 6 months before she passed, a codicil, an addition, was added to her will. It explicitly states that upon her death, the property reverts to her son, William, regardless of marital status. She wouldn't do that, I protested, feeling tears prick my eyes. She knew Bill left me. She was on my side. She was 92, Edna, Martha said softly, Bill probably went over there with a notary and a sad story when her mind was slipping. He likely convinced her that he was going to be homeless. It's manipulation, plain and simple. So we fight it, I said, leaning forward. We prove he manipulated her. Martha leaned back and looked me in the eye. We can. We can challenge the codicil based on undue influence and lack of capacity. But, Edna, Bill has money now, or at least Lori does. They will drag this out. A lawsuit like that could take 2 years. Depositions, expert medical witnesses, court fees. She paused, doing the math in her head. It will cost you upwards of $50,000 to fight this. And there is no guarantee we will win. If we lose, you're out the money and the house. I sat back, stunned. $50,000. I have a small savings account and my Social Security. I don't have a war chest. So that's it. I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I just lose after 40 years. I'm sorry, Martha said. The law isn't always fair. It's just the law. I walked out of her office feeling like I was carrying 100 pounds of lead on my shoulders. The sun was shining, but everything looked gray. I drove home on autopilot. When I pulled into the driveway, I looked at the house differently. Yesterday, it was my sanctuary. Today, it looked like a tomb. I went inside and made a cup of tea, but I didn't drink it. I felt helpless. Bill and Lori were going to win just because they were willing to play dirty. They saw this house as a pile of cash, a way to fund their business expansion. I walked into the small study off the kitchen. This was where I paid the bills and kept the family records. The old metal filing cabinet in the corner was dented from when the kids used to play indoor hockey. I pulled open the bottom drawer. It groaned, the metal screeching in protest. If I was going to be kicked out, I needed to start sorting through 30 years of paperwork. Tax returns, old warranties, birth certificates. I started grabbing handfuls of folders, tossing them into a cardboard box. I was angry now. I was angry at Bill for his betrayal, angry at myself for trusting him, angry at the world. My hand brushed against a thick, dusty folder at the very back of the drawer. The tab was yellowed and curling. It read, 2010, House/Foundation. I paused. I vaguely remembered that year. It was the year things really started to go wrong between Bill and me. He was working late every night, which I later learned meant he was seeing other women, and he was irritable whenever he was home. I pulled the folder out and opened it. Inside was a structural inspection report from 15 years ago. I sat down on the floor, surrounded by piles of paper, and started to read. I remembered now. We had a wet spring that year. The basement had smelled damp. I had begged Bill to call a specialist. He had complained about the cost, but he finally did it. I flipped to the summary page. The inspector's notes were written in red ink. Critical issue. Property sits on a shifting water table. Hydrostatic pressure is causing significant stress fractures in the foundation. The east wall is compromised. I frowned, reading on. Recommendation. Immediate intervention required. Excavation and installation of steel piers necessary to prevent structural failure. Estimated cost, $2,010, $45,000. I blinked. $45,000. 15 years ago. I remembered Bill reading this report. I remembered him throwing it on the desk. He had told me the guy was a crook trying to scam us. He said, "It's just a little water, Edna. I'll handle it." And he did handle it. I remembered what he did. He didn't hire the excavators. He didn't install the steel piers. He went to the hardware store, bought some waterproof sealant and cheap wood paneling, and spent a weekend covering up the east wall in the basement. He hid the cracks behind cheap pine boards. Out of sight, out of mind, he had told me, And because I trusted him, and because I was busy raising our teenagers, I believed him. I looked at the date on the report. 15 years. If the damage was critical 15 years ago, what was it now? I scrambled to my feet, my knees popping, and rushed to the basement door. I flipped the switch and went down the wooden stairs. The air down, there was heavy, thick with moisture. It had always smelled that way, but I had just gotten used to it. I walked over to the east wall. It was still covered in that ugly, dark wood paneling Bill had put up. I reached out and touched it. The wood felt soft, almost spongy. I grabbed the edge of one of the panels. I pulled. It was stuck, but the rot had weakened the nails. I pulled harder, putting my back into it. With a loud crack, the panel came away. I gasped and covered my mouth. Behind the wood, the concrete wasn't just cracked. It was bowing. A jagged fissure, wide enough to stick my hand into, ran from the floor to the ceiling. Black mold was blooming along the edges of the crack like a disease. Water was weeping through the concrete, creating a dark puddle on the floor. The house was literally crumbling from the bottom up. I ran back upstairs to the study and grabbed the report again. I flipped to the back, doing some quick mental math. If it cost $45,000 to fix back then, with inflation and 15 years of worsening damage, the repair bill today would easily be over $150,000. Maybe more. I sat back in my chair, the report trembling in my hands. Lori had talked about equity. She and Bill thought this house was a gold mine. They thought they could kick me out, take a loan against the value of the house, and live the high life. They saw the fresh paint and the manicured lawn. They didn't know about the cancer eating away at the foundation. They didn't know because Bill was too busy cheating on me to fix it and too arrogant to remember. He had covered it up. A strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't fear anymore, and it wasn't sadness. I looked at the paper in my hand. This was a disclosure document. Legally, if I sold the house, I would have to show this to the buyer. But Bill wasn't buying the house. He was claiming it was already his. He was claiming he knew everything about it because it was his family legacy. If I showed this to them now, they might walk away. They might leave me alone. But if they walked away, I would be stuck with a house that was falling down. I would be the one facing a $100,000 repair bill I couldn't pay. The house would eventually be condemned, and I would be left with nothing. But if they took it, if they took the house, they took the problems. They took the shifting water table. They took the bowing wall. They took the mold. I thought about Lori's smirk. I thought about Bill telling me to find somewhere smaller. I thought about how they wanted to strip me of everything I had. They wanted the house so badly. They wanted what was rightfully theirs. I carefully placed the report back in the folder. I didn't put it back in the filing cabinet. I set it aside, under a stack of old knitting patterns. My heart was beating fast, but not from panic. For the first time since they knocked on my door, I wasn't the victim. I was the one holding the map to the minefield. Martha had told me I couldn't win the legal battle, but maybe I didn't have to fight the law. Maybe I just had to let nature take its course. I picked up the phone and dialed Martha's number. "Martha," I said when she answered, "I've been thinking. Draw up the papers. I'm willing to negotiate." I could hear the surprise in her voice. "Are you sure, Edna? You want to give up?" "I'm not giving up," I said, looking at the basement door. "I'm just giving them exactly what they asked for." The conference room at the mediation center was cold. It was one of those windowless rooms with fluorescent lights that hummed just loud enough to give you a headache. In the center of the room sat a long, oval mahogany table. It looked like a battlefield. On one side sat Bill and Lori, flanked by their lawyer, a man in a shiny suit who checked his watch every 2 minutes. On the other side sat Martha and me. I felt small. I had put on my best Sunday suit, a navy blue skirt and blazer that I've had for years, but facing them, I felt like a child being called to the principal's office. Lori was wearing a white dress that looked brand new, and she was typing furiously on her phone, not even acknowledging my presence. Bill was staring at a water pitcher in the center of the table as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. Martha squeezed my hand under the table. "Stay calm," she whispered. "Let me do the talking." The mediator, a tired-looking man named Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat. "We are here to resolve the dispute regarding the property at 42 Elm Street. I understand there is a contesting of the will." "There shouldn't be," Lori's lawyer cut in smoothly. "The codicil is clear. Mr. Freed is the sole beneficiary. Mrs. Freed has no claim. Honestly, we are being generous by even meeting here." Martha straightened her spine. "My client has lived in that home for 30 years. It was a gift. She has maintained it, paid the taxes, and improved the value. To evict her without compensation is unconscionable." Lori stopped typing. She set her phone down on the table with a sharp clack. She looked directly at me, her eyes hard and bright. "Unconscionable." Lori laughed. "What's unconscionable is that she's been squatting in Bill's house for 6 months since his mother died, living there for free." My breath hitched. "Squatting? That is my home." "Not anymore," Lori said. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous, low tone. "Here's the deal. Edna, you sign the quitclaim deed today. You agree to vacate the property in 30 days. You leave the appliances, the fixtures, and the window treatments. And if I don't?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Lori smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "If you don't, we proceed with the lawsuit. And we will add a countersuit for back rent." "Back rent?" I looked at Martha. She looked worried. Market value rent for a 4-bedroom house in that neighborhood is about $3,000 a month. Lori continued, clearly enjoying herself. "You've been there 6 months since Martha passed. That's $18,000 you owe us, plus legal fees. If you fight us, Edna, we will sue you for every penny. We will garnish your Social Security. We will put a lien on your car. We will leave you with absolutely nothing." The room went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. $18,000, plus the $50,000 to fight the will. They weren't just trying to take the house. They were threatening to destroy my entire future. They wanted to leave me destitute. I looked at Bill. "Bill," I said, "is this what you want? You want to bankrupt the mother of your children." Bill shifted in his chair. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Edna, look, it's just business. We have the right to the income from the property. If you just sign, we'll waive the back rent. It's a clean break." A clean break. That's what he called it. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. I thought about the document hidden in my purse, the inspection report about the basement. I thought about the rotting foundation, the black mold, the shifting water table. I thought about the $150,000 repair bill waiting for whoever owned that house. If I signed the house over to them, they would inherit that disaster. They would walk into a financial nightmare that would likely bankrupt them. I felt a pang of guilt. I was raised in the church. I was raised to be honest, to treat others how I wanted to be treated. Even though they were hurting me, even though they were being cruel, did they deserve to be ruined? Did Bill, the man I once loved, deserve to lose everything because of a mistake he made 15 years ago? I wrestled with my conscience. The good wife in me wanted to warn him. I wanted to tell him that the prize he was fighting for was actually a grenade. I took a deep breath. I decided I had to try. I had to be the bigger person. "Bill," I said softly. Before we sign anything, there is something you need to know. It's about the house. Lori rolled her eyes. Oh, here we go. What is it now? The ghosts? The sentimental value? We don't care? Edna. No, I said, ignoring her and looking straight at Bill. It's about the basement. Do you remember the inspection from 2010? The water damage. Bill frowned. He looked confused for a second, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. The water? That was just a leak. I fixed it. You didn't fix it, Bill, I said earnestly. You covered it up. And it's gotten worse. Much worse. I went down there. The wall is bowing. If you take this house, you are taking on a massive liability. You need to know that. I was about to tell him about the mold. I was about to tell him about the six-figure repair estimate. I was about to save him from himself. But Lori slammed her hand on the table. Shut up, she screamed. The violence of her voice made everyone jump. Even her lawyer looked startled. Shut up, you jealous old woman. Lori hissed. Her face was red, her neck veins bulging. We don't care about your stories. We don't care about your little made-up problems. You are just trying to scare us because you're bitter. You're trying to stall. I'm trying to help you, I said, my voice shaking. We don't want your help. Lori yelled. She pointed a finger right in my face. We want the house. Just sign the papers and get out of our lives. We don't want to hear another word out of your mouth, unless it is goodbye. She turned to Bill. Make her sign it, Bill. I am sick of listening to her whine. I looked at Bill. This was it. This was his chance to be a man. This was his chance to say, wait, let her speak. This was his chance to ask me what I meant about the basement. Bill looked at Lori, who was fuming. Then he looked at me. He saw the concern in my eyes. He saw that I was trying to reach him. And he looked away. Just sign it, Edna, Bill said quietly, staring at the table. Lori is right. We don't need to hear this. Just sign the deed. The room went dead silent again. Something inside me snapped. Not in a violent way, but like a heavy rope finally being cut. I had tried. I had offered them mercy. I had tried to warn them that they were standing on a trapdoor, and they had told me to shut up. Lori had called me a jealous old woman. Bill had chosen his greed over my voice. I looked at the paperwork in front of me, the quitclaim deed, the surrender of my home, the surrender of 30 years of memories, but also the surrender of the rot, the surrender of the mold, the surrender of the debt. A strange calm settled over me. It was the peace of knowing I had done my duty. I had tried to speak the truth. They had rejected it. Whatever happened next was not on my hands. It was on theirs. Okay, I said. My voice was steady now. Okay. Edna, Martha whispered. Are you sure? We can still push for. No, Martha, I said, not taking my eyes off Bill. They want the house. They have made it very clear. I am done fighting. I reached into my purse. For a second, my hand brushed the inspection report I had brought with me. I could pull it out. I could slam it on the table and prove them wrong. I left it there. I pulled out my reading glasses instead. I put them on. I picked up the heavy black pen from the table. You promised to waive the back rent. I asked, looking at Lori. Yes, just sign it. Lori waved her hand dismissively, already texting again. And I take my personal belongings and leave in 30 days. 30 days. Not a day more. Bill said. Fine, I said. I lowered the pen to the paper. The scratching sound of the ink on the page seemed incredibly loud in the quiet room. Edna Marie Freed. I signed my name. I dated it. I pushed the paper across the table. There, I said, it's yours. All of it. The equity, the land, and everything that comes with it. Lori snatched the paper up, immediately checking the signature like a hawk. A smug, victorious grin spread across her face. Finally, she breathed. We won. She looked at me with pity. Don't feel too bad. Edna, you'll find a nice little apartment somewhere. Maybe a bingo hall nearby. She stood up, gathering her things. Come on, Bill. We have champagne to pop. Bill stood up slowly. He wouldn't look at me. He just followed his wife toward the door. I sat there for a moment, my hands folded on the empty table. Martha looked at me with sad eyes. I'm so sorry, Edna, she said. I know how much you loved that house. I took off my glasses and put them back in my purse, right next to the secret I had kept. It's okay, Martha, I said, and to my surprise, I actually smiled. Sometimes the Lord works in mysterious ways, and sometimes getting exactly what you asked for is the worst punishment of all. I stood up and walked out of the room, leaving the house and the disaster beneath it in Bill and Lori's hands. I had warned them. They just didn't listen. 30 days sounds like a long time when you say it out loud. When you are looking at a calendar, a month feels like plenty of room to breathe. But when you are packing up 40 years of a life, 30 days is nothing. It is a blink of an eye. The morning of the move was gray. The sky was heavy with clouds, threatening rain, which felt fitting. I had spent the last week living in a maze of cardboard boxes. The house echoed now. The rugs were rolled up, the curtains were down, and the walls were bare. Every time I spoke, my voice bounced back at me, hollow and lonely. I had hired a small moving truck and 2 local boys to help me load the boxes. They were sweet boys, polite and strong, treating my china cups like they were made of glass. But even with their help, the physical toll was exhausting. My back ached. My knees popped every time I bent down. According to the agreement I had signed in that cold conference room, I was only allowed to take my personal effects. The fixtures and heavy furnishings were to stay. Bill had insisted on it. He claimed the large oak dining table, the heavy sideboard in the hallway, and the master bedroom set were part of the house's value. At first, that had made me cry. I had polished that table every Thanksgiving for 3 decades. I had saved for 2 years to buy that bedroom set. Leaving them behind felt like leaving pieces of my own body. But as I watched the boys struggle to lift my heavy boxes, I looked at that massive dining table. It weighed a ton. It took up so much space. And suddenly, a thought crossed my mind. Where would I even put it? My new apartment was lovely, but it was small. It was a 2-bedroom unit on the ground floor of a quiet complex near the park. It had big windows and a modern kitchen, but it didn't have a formal dining room. If I had fought to keep that table, it would have been a burden. It would have cluttered up my new, clean space. I ran my hand along the smooth wood of the table one last time. Goodbye, old friend, I whispered. You're their problem now. Just as the movers were loading the last box, my collection of gardening books, a car engine roared in the driveway. My stomach tightened. I didn't need to look out the window to know who it was. They were early. Of course they were. The front door swung open without a knock. Lori breezed in, wearing a bright yellow raincoat and carrying a clipboard. She looked like she was ready to direct a construction crew. Bill trailed behind her, looking miserable and damp. You're still here? Lori asked, checking her watch. It's 10 o'clock, Edna. The contract said vacating by noon. You're cutting it close. We are loading the last box now, I said, keeping my voice even. I refused to let her see me cry. I refused to let her see me break. The house will be yours in 10 minutes. Lori didn't listen. She was already busy. She marched into the living room, her heels clicking on the bare floorboards. She pulled a metal tape measure from her purse and snapped it out, measuring the width of the room. "Bill, look at this," she called out. "If we knock out this wall here, we can open up the whole floor plan. And these floors, ugh. I told you, we need to rip them up. I'm thinking gray laminate. It's very trendy." I stood by the door, clutching my purse. I watched her dismiss the hardwood floors, original oak that I had loved, as if they were trash. "Those floors are solid oak," I said, unable to help myself. "You can't just find wood like that anymore." Lori turned to me, snapping the tape measure back with a sharp sip. "Edna, please," she sighed, giving me a pitying look. "You're living in the past. People don't want solid oak. That squeaks. They want modern. They want clean lines. We are going to flip this place and double our money. We need to improve the property value, not run a museum." Improve the property value. The words hung in the air. I almost laughed. It would have been a bitter, hysterical laugh, so I bit my lip to keep it inside. She was talking about gray laminate and open floor plans, completely unaware that 20 feet below where she was standing, the earth was swallowing the foundation. She was measuring for curtains while the basement wall was bowing inward, holding back tons of wet soil. She thought she was standing on a gold mine. I knew she was standing on a sinkhole. Bill walked past me, carrying a toolbox. He stopped for a second. We were close enough to touch. He looked at the boxes in the truck, then at the empty hallway. "You got everything?" he asked. His voice was rough. "I took what matters," I said. "I left the rest for you, just like you wanted." He nodded, looking uncomfortable. "It's for the best, Edna. You'll be better off. Less to worry about." "You're right, Bill," I said, and I meant it. I will have much less to worry about. He didn't catch the double meaning. He just shuffled into the kitchen to inspect the appliances. I took one last walk through the house. I went into the kitchen. I looked at the window over the sink where I used to watch the kids play in the backyard. The backyard was overgrown now. I hadn't had the energy to weed it this year. Lori had already complained about it, saying they would bulldoze the garden to put in a patio. Let them. I walked to the door of the basement. It was closed. I rested my hand on the doorknob. I could feel the cold radiating through the wood. Down there, in the dark, the mold was growing. The water was seeping. The cracks were widening. It was a slow-motion disaster waiting for a heavy rainstorm. I thought about the inspection report tucked safely away in my new apartment. I thought about the moment I tried to speak, and Lori screamed at me to shut up. I tried. I whispered to the door. I really did. I pulled my hand away. I didn't feel guilty anymore. I felt light. It was a strange sensation. I was losing my home. I was being forced out by a younger woman and my ex-husband. By all accounts, I should have been devastated. I should have been wailing and gnashing my teeth. But as I looked at the heavy furniture I didn't have to move, and the old plumbing I didn't have to fix, and the rotting foundation I didn't have to pay for, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't losing a home. I was escaping a trap. I walked back to the front door. Lori was there, writing furiously on her clipboard. "Okay, the painters are coming tomorrow," she was muttering to herself. "And the contractor for the basement remodel is coming on Monday." I paused. "You're remodeling the basement?" "Obviously," Lori said without looking up. "We're going to finish it. Put in a game room and a wet bar. It adds square footage. That's where the real money is." "Good luck with that," I said. She finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Is that sarcasm?" "No," I said honestly. "It's just a big project. Old houses have secrets. Lori, we can handle it," she sneered. "We have money, Edna. Unlike some people, we can afford to do things right." "I'm sure you can," I said. I stepped out onto the porch. The air outside was fresh and cool. The moving truck engine was idling, a steady hum that sounded like progress. I turned around to look at the house one last time. Bill had come to the door to stand next to Lori. They stood there together, framed by the doorway of the house they had stolen. They looked proud. They looked like victors claiming the spoils of war. They had the house. They had the heavy oak table. They had the equity. And they had the rot. I closed my eyes for a second and whispered a silent prayer. Lord, thank you for closing this door. Thank you for taking this burden from me, even if it hurt. I release this house. I release this anger. I leave it all here at their feet. I opened my eyes and looked at them. Goodbye, Bill. Goodbye, Lori, I said. Bye, Edna. Lori waved her fingers dismissively. Don't forget to leave the keys on the counter. They are already there, I said. I walked down the steps. I didn't look back. I got into my car, put it in drive, and pulled out of the driveway for the last time. As I drove down the street, the first drops of rain started to hit my windshield. Heavy, fat drops. The sky opened up, and the rain began to pour. I turned on my wipers and smiled. It was raining hard, and I knew exactly where all that water was going. I was heading to a dry, warm apartment on high ground. Bill and Lori were standing in a house built on a shifting water table, making plans to dig into a basement that was already holding on by a thread. I drove away, leaving the storm and the consequences behind me. 3 months have passed since I handed over the keys to the house on Elm Street. 3 months since I drove away in the rain, leaving my entire history in the rearview mirror. If you had asked me a year ago where I saw myself today, I would have told you I'd be in my garden pruning the hydrangeas, waiting for the grandkids to visit. I never would have imagined I'd be living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex called the Willow Gardens. But here I am, and the strangest thing has happened. I am happier than I have been in years. My new apartment is small. Yes, I had to get rid of the formal dining table, and my china cabinet didn't fit, so I gave it to my daughter. But this place is bright. It has big sliding glass doors that look out onto a little patio where I've put my potted herbs. The kitchen is modern. Everything works. The dishwasher doesn't rattle. The faucet doesn't drip. The floors are a soft, warm carpet that feels good on my feet. Best of all, there is a lightness here. I don't wake up worrying about the roof leaking. I don't stress about the lawn needing to be mowed or the gutters needing to be cleaned. When a light bulb goes out in the hallway, I call the maintenance man, a nice young fellow named David, and he fixes it for free. I have found a new rhythm. I go to Bible study on Tuesdays. I play bridge with the ladies down the hall on Thursdays. My children visit more often because I'm not constantly fretting about keeping up the house. We sit on my comfortable beige sofa, drink iced tea, and actually talk. I didn't realize how heavy that big house was until I put it down. It was a golden cage, and Bill and Lori had done me the favor of opening the door, even if they thought they were punishing me. It was a Tuesday afternoon. When the storm hit, it was one of those classic North Carolina storms where the sky turns a bruised purple and the rain comes down in sheets, turning the streets into rivers. I was sitting in my favorite armchair by the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. I had a cup of Earl Grey tea in my hand and a book on my lap. I was warm. I was dry. I was safe. My phone rang, cutting through the sound of the thunder. It was Betty, my old next-door neighbor from Elm Street. Betty is a good woman, but she loves to talk. She is the neighborhood news network. If a stray cat walks down the street, Betty knows where it came from and who it belongs to. "Hello, Betty," I answered, expecting her to complain about the weather. Edna, her voice was breathless, almost shouting over the sound of rain on her end. "Edna, are you sitting down?" "I am," I said, marking my page in my book. "What's wrong? Is everyone okay?" "You are not going to believe what is happening across the street," Betty said. "It's the house. Your old house. My hand tightened on the phone. What about it? It's collapsing. Edna, the whole side of the house is caving in. I set my tea down on the coaster. Slow down, Betty. What do you mean? Betty took a deep breath and launched into the story. And as she spoke, the picture became clear. It was a picture of greed, arrogance, and gravity. Apparently, Lori hadn't wasted any time. The day after I moved out, she had contractors swarming the property. She wanted that game room and wet bar she had bragged about. She wanted to increase the square footage, to flip the house for a massive profit. But Lori didn't like being told no. When the contractors told her the basement ceiling was low, she told them to dig down. When they told her the soil was wet, she told them to ignore it and keep working. She was in a rush. She wanted it done now. Betty told me that for the last month there had been jackhammers going all day. They had stripped the basement walls down to the bare concrete. They had removed the wood paneling. The paneling Bill had used to hide his sins 15 years ago. They exposed that big crack. Edna, Betty whispered. The contractor apparently told them they needed to stop and shore up the foundation. He told them it was dangerous. But I heard Lori screaming at him in the driveway last week. She told him he was trying to rip them off. She fired him and hired a cheaper crew who would do what she said. And then the rain came. For 3 days it had rained. The ground was saturated. The water table, that shifting, treacherous water table I had warned them about, rose up without the proper support. And with the cheap crew digging around the footings to lower the floor, the pressure became too much. It sounded like a bomb went off. Betty said, I was in the kitchen, and I felt the ground shake. I looked out the window, and the whole east wall, the side with the chimney, just gave way. It buckled right into the basement. I closed my eyes. I could see it. I could see the wall where I used to store the Christmas decorations crumbling into a pile of mud and concrete. The chimney collapsed. I asked. It tore right off the side of the house. Betty confirmed. It smashed through the new deck they just built. The roof has sagged on that side. Edna, it's a disaster. The fire department is there now. They've put yellow tape around the whole yard. Are Bill and Lori okay? I asked. I didn't wish them physical harm. I'm not a monster. They're fine physically, Betty said. They were upstairs when it happened, but they're outside now. And Edna, you should see them. Tell me, I said softly. Lori is hysterical. She is standing in the rain in her expensive shoes, screaming at the fire chief. She's screaming that she's going to sue the city, sue the contractors, sue everyone. But the fire marshal just slapped a big orange sticker on the front door. Condemned. Unsafe for habitation. Betty read. They can't go back in. They can't sleep there. They have to leave. Tonight. I looked around my dry, cozy apartment. I looked at my solid walls. And Bill? I asked. Bill is just sitting on the curb. Betty said, her voice dropping lower. He's sitting in the rain with his head in his hands. He looks broken. Edna. I heard Lori yelling at him. She was screaming. You said this place was a gold mine. You said it was solid. He knew, I said to myself, but Betty heard me. What was that? Nothing, I said. Just old houses have secrets. Betty continued. The rumor is that insurance won't cover it. My nephew is an adjuster, and he says if the damage was caused by unpermitted renovations or negligence, the policy is void. If they dug out that basement without a permit, and if the foundation issue was pre-existing, Edna, they are going to be on the hook for everything. Everything, I repeated. The mortgage payments, the construction, loans they took out for the renovations, the cost of demolishing the unsafe structure, or the massive cost of rebuilding it properly, and now the cost of a hotel and storage for their things, if they could even get their things out safely. They were bleeding money. The asset Lori had smirked about was now a sinkhole sucking down every dime they had. "It's a money pit," Betty said, sounding satisfied in the way neighbors do when the arrogant new folks get taken down a peg. "They are going to lose a fortune." We talked for a few more minutes. Betty promised to keep me updated and send pictures once the rain stopped. When I hung up the phone, the apartment felt very quiet. I walked over to the kitchen and filled the kettle. I waited for the whistle, poured the hot water over a fresh tea bag, and watched the steam rise. I thought about Bill sitting on the curb in the rain. I thought about the time 15 years ago when he told me I was nagging him about the basement. I thought about the mediation room where Lori told me to shut up when I tried to save them. I had tried. I had really tried to be the good Christian woman. I had offered them the truth, but they were so blinded by the shine of the rightful share that they couldn't see the rot underneath. I walked back to my chair by the window. The rain was still drumming against the glass, but it couldn't touch me. I took a sip of my tea. It was warm and soothing. I didn't feel the need to drive over there. I didn't feel the need to stand on the sidewalk and say, "I told you so." I didn't need to see Lori's ruined mascara or Bill's regret. The Lord says, "Vengeance is mine." And clearly, he doesn't need my help. He just needed me to get out of the way so gravity could do its job. I nodded to myself, a small, slow nod. "You wanted the house, Bill." I whispered to the rain. "You wanted all of it. Now you have it." I opened my book and went back to reading. The words on the page were clear and steady. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I was just an old woman in a small apartment, enjoying a rainy afternoon while the castle across town crumbled into the mud. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely and totally free. I was in the middle of baking cinnamon rolls when the knock came. The apartment smelled like yeast and brown sugar, a warm, comforting scent that always makes a house feel like a home. It was a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the collapse. The news trucks had finally stopped parking on Elm Street, and the gossip in the neighborhood had started to die down, replaced by the next scandal. I wasn't expecting anyone. My daughter usually calls before she comes over, and the maintenance man, David, doesn't work on weekends. I wiped my floury hands on my apron and walked to the door. I checked the peephole, a habit I had developed living alone. When I saw who was standing in the hallway, I pulled back. I had to blink and look again. The man on the other side of the door looked like Bill, but he looked like a version of Bill that had been put through a wringer and hung out to dry in a storm. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. "Hello, Bill," I said. He stood there, slumped against the doorframe. He was wearing a wrinkled polo shirt that looked like he had slept in it. His face was unshaven, covered in gray stubble that aged him 10 years. The arrogance that had radiated off him 3 months ago, the chest-out, chin-up posturing he had done when Lori was by his side, was completely gone. "Edna," he croaked. His voice sounded dry, like he hadn't used it in days. Can I come in for a minute?" I hesitated. My instinct was to say no. This was my sanctuary. I didn't want his chaos crossing my threshold, but looking at his red-rimmed eyes and shaking hands, I felt a pang of pity. Not love, not longing, just the basic human pity you feel for a stray dog that's been kicked. "You can come into the entryway," I said, stepping back but keeping my hand on the doorknob. "I have rolls in the oven." He walked in, bringing the smell of stale rain and cheap motel soap with him. He looked around my small apartment. He saw the sunlight streaming onto the beige carpet. He saw the pictures of the grandkids on the wall. He saw the piece I had built. "It's nice," he muttered, looking down at his scuffed shoes. "Small, but nice." "It suits me," I said. "What do you want, Bill?" He let out a long, shuddering sigh. "I don't know where to start." It's a mess, Edna. A total mess. I heard about the house. I said calmly, "The house is gone," he corrected me, his voice cracking. "The city condemned it. We can't even get our furniture out. The inspector says it's structurally unstable. If we try to move the heavy stuff, the second floor might come down on top of us. Everything is trapped in there. Your old dining table, the bedroom set, all of it." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and in a way it is a waste of good furniture. The insurance denied the claim. Bill continued, the words spilling out of him like he just needed someone to listen. "They sent the letter yesterday. They said the collapse was caused by negligent excavation and pre-existing foundation failure. They won't pay a dime. Not for the house. Not for the temporary housing. Nothing." He looked up at me, his eyes desperate. "We owe the bank for the construction loan. We owe the contractors. The neighbors are suing us because the collapse damaged their fence and cracked their driveway. We are looking at bankruptcy, Edna, at our age. Bankruptcy." I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms over my apron. "Where is Lori?" Bill flinched as if I had slapped him. He looked away, staring at the coat rack. "She's gone," he whispered. "Gone. She left yesterday. She said she couldn't handle the stress. She said I promised her security, and I gave her a disaster." He let out a bitter, dry laugh. "She's staying with her sister in Florida. She took the car. She took the jewelry. She said she'll be filing for divorce as soon as she finds a lawyer." I nodded slowly. I wasn't surprised. Not even a little bit. Lori was a woman who liked shiny things. When the shine wears off and the rust shows through, people like that don't stick around to scrub it clean. "I figured she might," I said. Bill looked at me, tears forming in his eyes. "I gave up everything for her. Edna, I gave up our marriage. I gave up my relationship with the kids. I kicked you out of your home. And the second the money ran out, she walked out the door." "That was your choice, Bill," I said gently. "You made your choices." He wiped his face with his hand. I know I did. But, Edna, I'm drowning. The hotel is costing me $200 a night. I don't have access to my accounts because the bank froze them pending the lawsuit." He took a step toward me, reaching out a hand. "I need help. Just a loan. Just until I can sell the lot. The land is still worth something. Once I sell the land, I can pay you back. Please. For old time's sake. For the kids." I looked at his hand. It was shaking. This man, who had stood silently while his new wife called me a squatter, was now begging me for money. "I can't do that, Bill," I said firmly. "Edna, please," he begged. "I have nowhere to go. I'm 67 years old. I'm going to be homeless." "You have a pension," I reminded him. "You'll survive. But I cannot give you money. That money is for my future. It's for the grandchildren." He stared at me, his desperation turning into something sharper. He looked at my face, really studying me. He saw the lack of surprise. He saw the calm acceptance. His eyes narrowed. A thought seemed to click into place in his mind. "You aren't surprised," he said slowly. "About the insurance. About the foundation." "No," I said. "I'm not." The insurance adjuster, he said the cracks in the basement were old. He said someone had tried to cover them up with wood paneling years ago. Bill's face went pale. He remembered. I could see the memory hit him like a physical blow. He remembered the weekend he spent nailing up that paneling. He remembered ignoring the report. "You knew," he whispered. I didn't say anything. I just held his gaze. "You knew." His voice rose, trembling with anger and disbelief. "When you signed the papers, when you gave us the house, you knew the foundation was rotting. You knew the whole thing was a ticking time bomb." "I knew there were issues," I said quietly. "And you let us take it?" Bill shouted, stepping closer. You let us sink our money into a death trap. You let us destroy ourselves. I didn't let you do anything, Bill, I said, my voice hardening. You demanded it. You came to my porch. You threatened me. You told me you were taking what was rightfully yours. You could have told us. Bill yelled. You could have warned us. If you had told me the repair bill would be $200,000, I never would have touched it. I would have let you keep the damn house. I tried, I said. The words hung in the air between us. Bill froze. What? In the mediation room, I said, keeping my voice steady. Think back, Bill. Before I signed the deed, I looked at you. I told you I needed to tell you something about the basement. I told you about the water damage. Bill's mouth opened, then closed. He remembered. I saw it in his eyes. And what did Lori do? I asked. Bill looked down. She told you to shut up. She screamed at me. I corrected him. She called me a jealous old woman. She said, we don't care about your stories. Just sign. I took a step forward, standing tall in my own entryway, and I looked at you, Bill. I gave you a chance. I looked you right in the eye and waited for you to ask me what I meant. I waited for you to be a man and hear me out. Bill slumped against the wall, defeated. I just wanted to get it over with. You told me to sign, I said. You chose her anger over my warning. You chose your greed over the truth. I tried to speak. Bill, Lori told me to be quiet. I simply respected her wishes. Bill stared at me. The realization washed over him, the absolute crushing weight of his own mistake. He couldn't blame me. He couldn't blame the insurance company. He couldn't even fully blame Lori. He had held the pen. He had silenced the warning. He had signed his own warrant. You played us, he whispered, shaking his head. You played us like a fiddle. I didn't play anyone, I said. I just stepped out of the way and let you run. The timer on the oven beeped. The sound was bright and cheerful, breaking the tension in the room. My rolls are done, I said. You need to leave, Bill. Edna, go, I said. Go call your lawyer. Go sell the land. Go figure out your life. But do not come here asking me to pay for the wreckage you created. Bill pushed himself off the wall. He looked 10 years older than when he walked in. He looked like a man who had nothing left, no wife, no house, no money, and no pride. He opened the door. The hallway behind him was empty. I'm sorry, he whispered, and this time I think he actually meant it. I know, I said. Goodbye, Bill. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I stood there for a moment, listening to his heavy footsteps recede down the hallway. I waited until I heard the outer door of the building close. Then I walked into the kitchen. I opened the oven and pulled out the pan of cinnamon rolls. They were perfect, golden brown, rising high, and smelling of sweetness. I set them on the counter to cool. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I picked up the icing and began to spread it over the warm rolls, watching it melt into the cracks, covering everything in sweetness. Bill had his mess. I had my piece. And as far as I was concerned, the accounts were finally balanced. The lock clicked. That sound was small, just a piece of metal sliding into place. But in my quiet apartment, it sounded like a gavel coming down in a courtroom. The verdict was in. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door for just a second. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the urge to run after him. I didn't feel the need to call him back and offer him a check or a place to sleep on my sofa. For 40 years, I had been the fixer. When Bill broke something, I glued it back together. When he made a mess, I cleaned it up. When he forgot a birthday or a bill, I was there to smooth it over. I had spent my entire adult life trying to keep the foundation of our family from cracking, never realizing that he was the one chipping away at it with a pickaxe. But today, I didn't fix it. I let the pieces lie where they fell. I turned around and walked back into my kitchen. The smell of cinnamon and sugar was heavy in the air, sweet and inviting. I took a deep breath. This was the smell of my new life. No mold, no secrets, just warmth. I had just set the pan of rolls on the table when the doorbell rang again. For a split second, my heart jumped. Had he come back? Was he going to beg harder? Was he going to yell? But then I heard it, the high-pitched, muffled giggling on the other side of the door. I smiled, a real smile that reached my eyes. I walked over and opened the door. Grandma, my two grandchildren, Leo and Sophie, nearly tackled me. They are 7 and 9, full of energy and noise. Behind them stood my daughter, Sarah, holding a bouquet of grocery store daisies. "Hi, Mom," Sarah said, looking tired but happy. "We were in the neighborhood, and the kids begged to see you. I hope it's okay." "It is more than okay," I said, ushering them in. "You are right on time. The cinnamon rolls are still hot." The apartment, which had felt so quiet just an hour ago, was suddenly filled with life. Leo was kicking off his shoes by the door. Sophie was already running to the patio door to look at my herb garden. Sarah was putting the flowers in a vase at the sink. "Did I see? Was that Dad's car leaving the parking lot?" Sarah asked carefully, keeping her back to me as she filled the vase. "It was," I said. I picked up a spatula and started putting the sticky rolls onto plates. Sarah turned around, worry etched on her face. "Is everything okay? Did he cause trouble?" I handed a plate to Leo, who looked at the frosting with wide eyes. "No trouble," I said calmly. "He just came to say goodbye." Sarah looked at me, searching for cracks in my armor. She knew about the house collapse. She knew about the insurance. She knew her father was in a bad way. "He looked rough," Sarah said. "He is having a hard time," I admitted. "But he is a grown man, Sarah. He will find his way. Or he won't. But it isn't my job to carry him anymore." Sarah let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for weeks. She walked over and hugged me, squeezing tight. "I'm proud of you, Mom." "Come and eat," I said, patting her hand, "before the kids eat them all." We sat around my small kitchen table. It wasn't the massive oak table I had left at the house. It was a simple round table I had bought at a thrift store and painted white. We were sitting close, our elbows almost touching. I watched them eat. I watched Sophie get icing on her nose and laugh when Sarah wiped it off. I watched Leo try to explain a video game to his mother. I looked around the room. The walls were close. The carpet was plain. I didn't have a formal dining room or a guest wing. I didn't have a valuable asset to leave them in my will. But I had this. For months, I had been terrified of losing my home. I thought home was the address on my driver's license. I thought it was the height marks on the doorframe and the garden I had planted. I thought that without those 4 walls, I would be nothing. I thought I would be a displaced old woman with no history. But looking at my daughter and my grandchildren, I realized how wrong I was. The house on Elm Street was just wood and brick. And in the end, it was wood that rotted and brick that crumbled. It was built on a lie, maintained by deception, and destroyed by greed. It was never really a sanctuary. It was a stage where Bill performed his role until he decided to quit. This apartment, this was different. This was built on truth. I paid the rent with money. I managed myself. I decorated it with things that brought me joy, not things that impressed the neighbors. I filled it with the smell of baking and the sound of laughter. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted better than it ever had in the old house. "Grandma, are you going to plant tomatoes this year?" Leo asked, his mouth full. "I think I will," I said. "I have space on the patio for 2 big pots. You can help me." "Cool," he said. I leaned back in my chair. The sun was breaking through the clouds outside, casting a warm square of light onto the carpet. I thought about Bill, driving away in the rain, looking for a place to land. I hoped he found peace. I truly did. I didn't hate him. Hate takes too much energy, and I didn't have any to spare. I needed all my energy for my tomatoes and my bridge games and my grandbabies. I had walked through the fire. I had been threatened, insulted, and cast aside. I had stood in a mediation room and been told to shut up. I had been stripped of my material wealth. And yet, here I was, whole. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. I had traded a rotting mansion for a solid life. I looked at Sarah, who was laughing at something Sophie said. I realized then that you can't lose your home if your home is inside you. You carry it with you. You build it with your integrity, your faith, and your love. No one can foreclose on that. No one can bulldoze that. I touched the small cross necklace I wear every day. I closed my eyes for just a second, offering up one last thought to the one who had guided me through the storm. I had been so afraid of the door closing on my old life. But the moment that heavy door shut, this new one opened wide. The Lord protects the widow, sometimes in ways we don't expect. What city are you listening from? And what time is it there? Write it in the comments. And if you'd like to help me keep sharing these emotional, thrilling stories every day, even a small donation makes a big difference. It truly helps keep the channel alive. For more life stories like this, you can explore the other videos on my channel and subscribe. On the screen, you'll see 2 new stories I'm sure you'll enjoy. Click one and start listening right away. With love.